We have just exited from our first trade, which was this A category long trading opportunity. It proved to be a profitable trade, particularly if we were tightening our stops as price reached up over here. And it is now time for us to consider our next trading opportunity. We are still of the opinion that this could be an important cycle trough that formed over here, but taking a look at our cycle analysis, we can see that price is now coming down into a 3-hour cycle trough. As price crosses down below the signal cycle FLD and moves towards the mid-cycle trough that is going to form over here at this nest of lows, that is of course a D category short trading opportunity. Are we interested in taking that trade? As a general rule, I would say that we are not. If you are trading a longer time frame, then you could well do that. But because of the fact that we believe this is a long cycle trough that is forming here, it might not be a trade that we're interested in taking. But for the sake of completeness, we will consider it. There are a few things working against us here in terms of this trade. Notice the 100-minute cycle target, which is of course our signal cycle target. It's only over here and it has already been reached. Why is that? It's because of the fact that price initially found support at the level of the FLD and only actually slipped below it over here, which means that our crossing point below the FLD must have been there, and therefore the target is there. Again, the signs are not really very good for this as a short trade. However, the mid-cycle FLD over here, you can see at the moment is expected to provide us with an acceleration point to the downside. That's quite interesting. We could take advantage of that. And so let's assume that we're feeling aggressive and we do want to enter into a short trade. Again, the level at which we would enter into this short trade would probably be at the low of this bar. Let's step forward and see what happens. Stepping forward just a few bars, you can see that we would have been stopped into a short trade. Price has now encountered the mid-cycle FLD. And it is doing that at the time that the mid-cycle is expected to form a trough in the market. Despite the fact that the indicator is expecting an acceleration downwards, we should bear in mind that this FLD is likely to provide some support. We would certainly be wanting to tighten our stops at this point. So let's see what happens as we step forward. On the very next bar, price seems to be finding support at that FLD. Notice how this D category short trade provides us with an opportunity that you need to stay on your toes for. I mentioned this in the discussion about the FLDs. Price came down, touched the mid-cycle FLD, and at that point you'd probably want to be getting out. So the D category short trade usually does not provide us with a good short trading opportunity. I mentioned we might take it if we were feeling aggressive about this trade, but at this point, even if we were aggressive, we would probably want to be getting out of it, maybe taking a small profit or perhaps just simply exiting at a break-even point. Stepping forward a few bars again, exiting out of that short D category trade probably would have been a good idea, as you can see. Price has come back to our signal cycle FLD. Notice how the signal cycle FLD at this point is expected to provide resistance. It is possible, of course, that this 3-hour cycle trough, the nest of lows for which is at the foot of our chart, has formed in the market and is over here, in which case this would be an E category long interaction. But the indicator is warning us that the FLD should be providing resistance at this point. And so if we were aggressive and interpreting this as a bounce out of that 3-hour cycle trough, we might want to enter into a trade as price exceeds that high level. But the indicator is warning us not to. And so in this situation, I would step back and not enter into my long trade just yet. Let's see what happens. Price appears to cross above the signal cycle FLD, but look at our indications. We are still expecting resistance here. And a plus D symbol, which I've mentioned previously, is a post-D category tap. Under this circumstance, I would not be aggressively entering into an E category trade, but I might consider entering into an E category trade if price exceeds this price high over here. But notice how the mid-cycle FLD is still expected to provide resistance. Something is not right with this cycle picture. And so for that reason, I would probably not enter into a trade at this point. But if I did, thinking that we're going to get this kind of an M shape, then I would do so above the high of this bar. Let's step forward and see what happens. Here you can see evidence of resistance provided by both the signal cycle FLD and also the mid-cycle FLD. I'm fairly glad we did not jump into a long trade, but if we had set an entry above the high of this bar, as I think you can see, we would not have been stopped into that long trade. So we are safe for the moment. It looks as if the price still has some more downward action to fulfill before forming this 3-hour cycle trough. Let's step forward again. Indeed, price did have some more downward action to complete to form the 3-hour cycle trough. Look what has happened over here. Price has struck into the sequence cycle FLD. Of course, we don't make trading decisions on the basis of the sequence cycle FLD, but the fact that it has touched this FLD is likely to provide some support, even though the sequence cycle FLD, as you can see, is expecting a potential acceleration point downwards. So why is the sequence cycle FLD expecting an acceleration downwards? The reason is because of the cycle analysis we see on our charts. We have a 12-hour cycle nest of lows ahead of us. But remember that even though this cycle trough at the moment is marked as a sequence cycle trough, we believe it is of higher magnitude, meaning that this 12-hour cycle trough potentially lies behind us instead of ahead of us. Fortunately, we're not making trading decisions on the basis of price interacting with the sequence cycle FLD. We're making trading decisions on the basis of price interacting with the signal cycle FLD, our pink FLD over here. And as you can see, the next interaction between price and the signal cycle FLD is an E category long trading opportunity as price accelerates through that FLD. And so we do have another potential trading opportunity for a long trade. We still have these targets up here, the 3-hour target and the 6-hour targets that are sitting up at the top of our chart. This could be our opportunity for price to reach up towards these targets. So let's step forward again and see what happens. Price continues to find support at the level of that sequence cycle FLD. And now notice that our signal cycle FLD has of course come down to this level over here. We are still expecting an E category interaction, an acceleration point upwards. Notice what is happening with our cycle analysis. We now have the 3-hour cycle trough confirmed beneath this price trough over here. This is our next potential trading opportunity. Again, we should identify a good entry point. Here we have a price high that would be just above the FLD. An aggressive entry could be at that level, or we might want to be a little more conservative and wait for price to cross the FLD before entering. On the next bar, price does cross up above that signal cycle FLD. If we did not enter at the high of this bar, but were rather conservative, we could enter at the high of this bar or at the market price at the open of the next bar. Let's step forward again. And here we're seeing a good example of an E category long trade where prices crossed up above the signal cycle FLD. It has achieved our first target. Here is an interesting and potentially profitable situation for us. We have our 3-hour cycle target over here and our 6-hour cycle target over here. You can see how taking all your profits at the level of the 100-minute cycle target or the signal cycle target might be a mistake. We have the potential for extended upward action, particularly because we believe that this cycle trough that formed earlier today, right at the beginning of our trading session, was potentially a much higher magnitude cycle trough than our sequence cycle of 6 hours. So let's keep stepping forward. I've stepped forward another few bars, and here you can see that the 3-hour cycle target has been achieved. Notice something interesting happening as the 3-hour cycle target is achieved. We had a downward bar. You will see this happening time and time again. The price will achieve a target and then turn down again. It's because that cycle influence has been exhausted. Now let's consider the situation on our chart. At this point, we probably would have taken some more profits. We might still be hanging in there for this nice juicy 6-hour cycle target up at the top of our chart. But I've said this before and I will say it again. We need to bear in mind the cycles that we are trading on our chosen time frame. This is a 5-minute chart. We are trading the signal cycle, this 100-minute signal cycle FLD. Occasionally we will get strong runs all the way up to the 6-hour cycle target, but there is no guarantee. Let's consider our M shape for the cycle that we have actually been trading. There is the first part, all the way up to what is potentially the second peak of that M shape. What are we expecting next? Well, the cycle that we are trading is potentially going to turn down and bring price down into a trough over here. Yes, this is a nice juicy target up above us, and that target is likely to be reached. But is it going to be reached within time for us to take advantage of it? Again, if you take a look at the time at the foot of your chart, you will see that this bar over here was about 9:30. Again, this is MT4 time, and so we are now reaching the end of the New York trading session. We would probably want to be tightening our stops and considering ending our trading day. As a matter of interest, let's step forward another few bars just until the end of the New York session and see what actually happened. Notice how our price scaling, we have auto scaling enabled, suddenly changed. That's because price has crossed down below the 6-hour cycle FLD, which is our sequence cycle FLD. This move is almost certainly over. We can continue tracking it up until the end of the New York session, which is at this point here, and you can see price has come back to our signal cycle FLD. We have a potential F category short trading opportunity. However, it is the end of the New York session, and entering into a trade at this point would not be a good idea.